Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Craig Burrell, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Corporal Jeanette McNeely. We warmly welcome the family of Trooper Francis McMahon, whose story will be told shortly. We're also honoured to welcome members of the New Zealand Defence Force who are joining us this evening. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony around Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family, visitors, and students on behalf of the following schools: from New South Wales, Borrigal Public School, Wallsend South Public School, Ellamore Vale, and Bellbird Public School, and from Victoria, Seymour Primary School, Seymour. Please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Children, please sit. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations over more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Trooper Francis McMahon. Popularly known as Frank, Francis McMahon was born on the 1st of June 1894 in Tongala, Victoria, to Thomas and Alice McMahon. He was the 6th of 7 children born to the couple. Francis grew up in Tongala and Yundera, where he attended the local schools. In early June 1906, his mother, having suffered ill health for some years, died from pneumonia. 2 months later, his father died from heart failure. Now orphaned, Frank and 3 of his siblings went to live with an uncle and aunt on a property in Tongala, where they remained for 5 years. In 1911, Frank McMahon went to live with his brother Ned at Kellerberrin in Western Australia. Here he worked as a crop harvester, using both horse teams and a steam traction engine. He was also a member of the local fire brigade. Following the outbreak of First World War, McMahon enlisted on the 6th of October at Guildford, Western Australia, joining the newly raised 10th Light Horse Regiment. He embarked with his unit from Fremantle on the 8th of February 1915 aboard the transport ship Mashubra, bound for Egypt. Whilst he was engaged in training in Egypt, the Gallipoli campaign began. With the Australians suffering heavy casualties, the men of the Light Horse were ordered to Gallipoli. The men of the 10th Light Horse Regiment departed Egypt on the 16th of May and landed at Anzac late in the afternoon of the 21st of May. For the remainder of the month, the regiment rotated through the frontline positions of Quinn's Post, Courtney's Post and Pope's Hill. At the start of June, the regiment moved to Walker's Ridge below the Neck. Illness hit the regiment hard throughout July, and by the end of the month, McMahon had been evacuated to hospital with influenza. He returned to his unit on the 9th of August, the day after his regiment had been decimated in the disastrous attack at the Neck. On the evening of the 27th of August, the 10th Light Horse Regiment left Walker's Ridge and made its way to past number 6 post below Hill 60. The following day, plans were laid out and preparations were made. At 1 a.m. on the 29th of August, the Light Horsemen began their attack. They soon captured the stretch of the Ottoman trench line. McMahon was in a party led by Lieutenant Hugo Throssell, who formed a bomb stop at the extreme right of the captured line and held position for 6 hours against several counter-attacks and an incessant hail of bombs. As quick as the bombs landed in the trench, the Australians would throw them back, as well as throwing over their own bombs. With the sun coming up, the Ottoman troops began another attack on the Australian positions. Lieutenant Throssell wrote of what happened next. As the Turks were making one of their charges in the early morning, we saw a German officer picking up clods of earth and throwing them at the Turks to urge them on to the charge. Ferrier and McMahon put their rifles up and got sight of the German against the skyline and fired simultaneously. One of them both got him, and of course, both claimed it. McMahon said, "It has been my ambition ever since I enlisted to get a German officer. Now I am satisfied." He rose up to take another shot, and a bullet went clean through his head. As he fell back, a Turkish bomb crashed into the trench, exploding over him, blew him to pieces. McMahon was 21 years old. From his bed on the hospital ship, Throssell wrote to his commanding officer regarding the 4 men who had served alongside him during their epic fight. "I want you, sir, to recommend Corporal Ferrier, Trooper McMahon, Private Renton and Corporal McNee for some special distinction." McMahon was killed. Ferrier had his arm amputated and died on the boat. Renton had his leg taken off at the thigh, and McNee was twice wounded in the head and once in the hand. In my opinion, no honour could be too high. The fact that we held the trench, in my opinion, largely due to the splendid courage and accurate bombing of these glorious men. In 1916, McMahon was mentioned in Sir Ian Hamilton's dispatches for his gallant efforts. On the 17th of November, following a short advance at Hill 60 by members of the 1st Battalion, 1st Welsh Horse Yeomanry, Sergeant Sergeant J. Varley came across an Australian's body in a gully. On searching the body, the sergeant located McMahon's paybook, which contained an intact will with his brother's address. The sergeant wrote to Ned, stating, "I found your brother's body fully clothed by a small donga. I searched his body and have found his paybook as well as a few photos, which had been handed to the officer to be forwarded on to you. He was found quite decently, so you need not worry about that, and by appearances, he was shot through the head. You can rest assured he is where a good fight was put up." Sadly, there is no record of McMahon's body being brought in for burial, and his remains were not identified after the war. Today, his name is listed amongst the missing on the Lone Pine Memorial. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among more than 60,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Trooper Francis McMahon, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, had thoughts in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. Thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial, and good evening.